Hello everyone, and welcome to AndyDavo's guide to Necromantic Horror in Blood Bowl 2. Necromantic Horror, or Necro as they're regularly known, are a hybrid team in Blood Bowl 2 which favour a running playstyle. This guide for me is a little one of a personal favourite because Necro are one of my 3 or 4 favourite races in Blood Bowl 2, mostly because they contain the werewolf player who is one of the best players in Blood Bowl. This video will contain several different sections, so hopefully you can find what you're looking for. We're going to go for offensive and defensive setups. We're going to talk you through initial team builds, how to develop your team, and some common play in league, common team development in league play. We'll also talk about the stadium enhancement in Blood Bowl 2, and also any inducements that you may get and what you might want to be taking. In the follow-up video to this, we will also talk about the players themselves, specifically how you might start to use them, how they interact in the team, and then how you can try and get the best out of an Necro team. So I hope you enjoy the guide. Please leave comments, hopefully like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the different sections depending on what you're looking for. Thank you. Right, first up, let's have a quick look at the team. There are 5 different players for the Necro team. They all perform different roles and, as you can expect, have different starting skills. Let's move on to my favourite player for the Necro team, and one of my favourites in the whole of Blood Bowl, which is the werewolf. For those of you not used to Blood Bowl 2's skill icons, I've also put some of the names of the starting skills as the actual player names. So Necro Werewolf has a movement of 8, which is far superior to the average movement in Blood Bowl of 6, average strength of 3 and average agility of 3, and pretty much average armour of 8. He starts with the Claw, Frenzy and Regenerate skills, and can be made into an absolute beast of a player. I think on here you can see the starting skills that they're able to get. So they can get General and Agility, which means that you can pick up Block and Dodge as skills very easily, and they can also get Strength skills, i.e. Mighty Blow on a double, so they become absolute beasts of players when they've leveled up. Next player is the Flesh Golem. That has the Stand Firm skill. It also has been given Regenerate and Thick Skull. The stat line for that is Movement 4, Strength 4, lower than your average agility of 2, and higher armour, which is 9. So you can see there that they are type of roadblock players, which once they've got the block skill are very good at holding your line, or helping you just at a pinch punch through something. The skill access they've got is General and Strength, so they can get block and guard on normals. Once you've got those, you're kind of getting towards being a very solid player. Whites, they are exactly the same as the Undead White, which is stat line of 6, 3, 3, 8, and they have starting skill of block. They also have strength and general access on a normal, and tend to fulfill, unlike in the Undead team, the Blitzer position, they tend to fulfill either a sort of a hybrid secondary Blitzer, or they help support the Flesh Golems and try and hold the line, depending on how your team are levelling up. Next up, we've got the Ghoul. The Ghoul starts with the Dodge skill. Notice he's actually a little bit faster than the White, but not quite as quick as the Werewolf, with a movement of 7, average agility and average strength, and then lower armour. So you need to keep this player safe. It also doesn't have the Regenerate skill, so any injuries, you have got no way of getting them fixed unless you take a specific inducement, which is not usually taken. Finally, we've got the Zombie. And these guys really slow, movement 4 as you would expect from a zombie type player, average strength, below average agility of 2, and average armour. So pretty good punching bags, don't cost very much, only at 40k of team value, and you can have as many as you want of them, but they really aren't going to do much more than tie up opposition players. So that's the team in a nutshell, and we're going to move on now to talking about the team more specifically. Okay, so we just talked about the players themselves. Now it's probably a good way of looking at what you would do with them as they actually progress and level up. So I've actually, again, as for those of you not familiar with the player icons, named them there so you can read the skill progressions here. Taking a Flesh Golem, notice I've only actually taken one skill path for Flesh Golems, as the first 3 skills here, Block, Guard, and then Mighty Blow, generally, are the 3 Holy Trinity type skills. Once you've got those, you're golden. So, Block, because they could be doing a lot of blocking, Guard, because they'll be then in a lot of base contact and be supporting, and Mighty Blow to support when they are blocking. Now, some coaches will take Block, then Mighty Blow. Some will take Mighty Blow first. Some will take then Block, then Guard. It's entirely up to you. I strongly recommend that if you're watching this, you're probably slightly newer, and therefore take the safe skills first, which is Block first, then Guard, then Mighty Blow. But if you do get the chance, do try and take them out of order and see what happens, and you'll understand the differences that then does to your playstyle. Moving on to, as again, I'm going to say it again, my favourite player on this team and one of my favourites in Blood Bowl. On normal skills, Block, Dodge and Tackle are generally considered core skills to start off with on a werewolf. You might also want to throw in Sidestep after that once you've got these skills. If, however, you are luckily enough to get a double skill, then taking Mighty Blow, because Mighty Blow and Claw combine so well for player removal. And if you get a second double, you can take a second strength skill and take Piling On. You can also consider Juggernaut, because they might potentially be doing a lot of crowd surfing. That's entirely up to you. I would strongly recommend that you do take at least one Mighty Blow on the 2 werewolves first, because that you will get more mileage out of, as you're more likely to use Mighty Blow and Claw in conjunction with one another most of the time. Juggernaut is a bit more of a situational skill. As I just discussed in the player intros, these players, the whites, do tend to fulfill the secondary blitzer and general utility type player. So you tend to take one with Mighty Blow and Piling On initially, so you've got a blitzer, and then you do also then tend to take Guard, Tackle and Mighty Blow on one or both of them. So one will fulfill a general role, and then one will fulfill the secondary blitzing role. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I would strongly recommend you also consider trying to get Stand Firm in there, so you then have 3 Stand Firm players to stick on the line of scrimmage, which can also prevent or limit hugely the one-turning capabilities of some teams. So do consider Stand Firm in there. I would recommend, however, you get it after some of the skills listed here. Moving on to the ghouls. The ghouls generally are the ball carriers on this team's. Sometimes that role is fulfilled by a werewolf if it gets an agility increase, but in general you'll take one or both of the ghouls, which means Block, which combines with Dodge, giving you Blodge. Sure Hands and Fend are general skill picks for a ball carrier, very strong. After that you might want to consider Kick-Off Return, and there's nothing wrong with recycling ghouls from time to time, i.e. getting rid of it and buying a rookie one and going looking for doubles or stat increases over time. On the second ghoul, you might want to go for a ball hunter type player, and that would be a Wrestle, Tackle and Strip Ball, generally in that order. They will help you hunt down opposition ball carriers and pop the ball loose, so you can then steal it off them. On zombies, there are actually 3 different types of zombie here. Block is a general good first skill. Fend, because of their agility, means that once they get pushed over, you want to be able to try and reposition as much as possible, and Fend is a really good pitch control skill, which when combined with a Flesh Golem Stand Firm skill on other players and potentially on the whites, really means you've got a lot of pitch control, which is great. Guard on a zombie on a double is absolutely the go-to double skill, and stat wise I would only be taking the strength increase. I would skip all of the others on a zombie. You also need to take at least one dirty player zombie initially, because you will potentially be doing quite a lot of fouling, so do also consider at least one utility zombie with dirty player. Okay. So on Blood Bowl 2, there are 2 regular ways you're going to play Blood Bowl. You're going to play it in an open ladder format type situation, where you're going to get a chance to restart your team if it goes wrong. I've looked at this from a champion ladder perspective. Or you'll be playing it in a private league where once you've rolled up your team, you are stuck with it for X number of matches in the first season of the team. So I've looked at 2 different builds. I'm sure there are others, but these are the 2 that I would recommend. The first is for the open ladder format, where if you can play a game, if it goes wrong, you can just recycle it. So this is slightly more risky, and the payoff can be higher if things go well. The first thing we'll just talk about is there are only 2 team rerolls on the team. And the reason it's risky is because you've only got 2 team rerolls. You've got no natural skill access to picking up the ball. And with with agility 3 players, that means you're only picking up the ball on a 3+. You've also only got 2 players with block. So when you're throwing blocks, you will want to try and throw the blocks with the whites as much as possible to start off the turn. So it can be a little bit challenging. However, if you do win your first game and you are able to level one of the positionals, then brilliant. And you will then be able to invest in the 3rd team reroll on the ghoul fairly quickly. So that's for an open ladder format. Conversely, those of you who want to get rid of a bit of risk, you might want to take a slightly safer option and go for this roster. This roster I would regularly use in a league, and that is to start with the 3 team rerolls, because after team creation rerolls are double cost, so it would cost you 140k to save up for it. You only start with 1 wolf, which is your trade-off largely, but you do then get a ghoul. So I've still got 6 positionals, they're just slightly different. You've got a ghoul, which is a dedicated ball carrier. You've got 2 whites, you've still got 2 flesh golems, and then you've got 1 wolf that you can try and focus on leveling up. This one would work fine, and my first purchase after the initial team creation would just be to go straight away to go and get the 2nd werewolf. And I think that's a more rounded roster, which I would use in league play. So let's consider what stadium enhancements might be suited for the Necromantic team. Just in case you have not seen this before, the way to get the stadium enhancement is you need to come into the club section along here. You need to spend 100k initially upgrading your stadium from level 1 to level 2, and then you need to spend another 100,000 on whichever stadium enhancement you want. Now we have already covered off all the enhancements in the Wood Elf guide, so I'm just going to talk about the ones that I think are relevant. And they are about 3. The first one is the beer stand. So you are playing with 2 players with frenzy, so it would make a lot of sense that you should be able to get some crowd surfs. Therefore, +1 on injury rolls when a player is pushed off the pitch. Crowd surfed seems like a good one to be able to pick up. The next one is probably the one I would actually potentially go to, certainly in league play, which is the referee rest area. Now this allows both teams to receive a bribe at no extra cost. And as we talked about earlier, you should be rostering at least 1 dirty player, onto your team, and therefore you can bribe and using the dirty player to your benefit. Now your team also has regenerate, so when they foul you back, potentially they shouldn't be removing too many of your players, and if they do remove them, there's a good chance that they will regenerate and bounce back into your reserves box. You should be able to get more value out of this than your opponent, especially if you know you've got it. The third and final one I do think probably does help you is the Magic Dome. And the Magic Dome helps because you can't have anything other than nice weather. And Necro do suffer a little bit with pouring rain and or also a blizzard. So pouring rain means you're now picking up naturally on a 4. If you've got a ghoul with sure hands, that's maybe not the end of the world, but it does certainly impinge on being able to hand off the ball, and it limits your mobility, and anything in Blood Bowl that limits mobility is generally bad. So as a relatively neutral one, Magic Dome probably would suit you relatively well. We are just going to go through a couple of the others which I think are worth a mention, but I don't think we'll take them. Magician Shop, generally speaking, if you won't get that much value out of a wizard, certainly not the same level of value an elf team would get, so you could be behind in the value matchup on a number of occasions if you take that. Security Gate, this is worth a shout, but there are better options. The Riot and Pitch Invasion kickoff results are cancelled. Riot, yeah, that's probably annoying for all teams, so it's equal value everywhere. And Pitch Invasion, you've got some players with high movement and you should be able to recover relatively well. Astragon at Playing Service, that's actually a player style type choice, along with Elf Turf. If you're making lots of go for it, you might want to consider Elf Turf. If you are making no go for it whatsoever and you know you're playing in a league or situation where your opponents will take lots to go for it, then Astrianic might not be too bad. But again, there are better choices. Royal Box really is just for fluff reasons, and probably should never be taken at all. And then the Throw a Rock and Get the Ref kickoff resents are cancelled. Well, we like Get the Ref, so we don't want cancelling that out. And Throw a Rock, you've got regen. You're probably going to be okay in the long run. The final one, Nuffle Alter. Necro don't have access to any particularly cheap star players other than the Chainsaw. So dropping Wilhelm Chaney down by 50k, for example, or two of the very expensive star players, as we've just discussed, dropping them down by 50k, again, doesn't really seem that much value. So there are better choices elsewhere. Overall, I hope that helps. Yeah, I strongly recommend that wherever possible, consider referee rest area or beer stand. Okay, so let's consider the Necromantic Inducements. In this section, we're going to assume that you're playing uphill team value wise, and we're going to go through some of the inducements that are worth it and some that just simply aren't worth their cost. First of all, let's talk about Babes, Rerolls, Wizards and Bribes, which are things that every team's got access to. Babes, absolutely brilliant if you're talking about a game that you think your opponent is very likely to remove players, or you've only got 11 players yourself where you need to be bringing your players back regularly. I wouldn't put them in the first 100k's worth of spend, but I would put them in there and I wouldn't rule them out. Rerolls, generally speaking, if you've got 2 or 3 rerolls, don't take any more. You'll be able to get better value elsewhere. A Wizard, if you've got access to an Agility 4 player, you're probably going to get additional value out of Wizard, as you might be able to not only stop their score, but turn them over. If you've only got Agility 3 players, a Wizard, while it might stop them scoring, probably doesn't turn itself into a score. So you need to weigh this up against the next inducement, which is a Bribe. On most Necro teams, you will be running a Dirty player, which means that on a +1 on the injury roll, which is the roll that gets rid of them off the pitch, you should be able to roll a 7+ to get rid of them, as long as you've got enough assists on the actual foul to get rid of the armour. Therefore, Bribes and Dirty players synergise extremely well and should be one of the first things that I would pick up. So I would go with the first 100k, I'd go with a Bribe. If you've got 250k, I'd probably go with a Bribe and a Wizard. And if the game has got an overtime format on it, I would consider Babes. And they are my stock go-to things. Now let's have a quick look at star players. So the star players that Necromantic have got access to. We've got Hack and Slash, which is a chainsaw with armor 7 and sidestep, has no defensive skills whatsoever, block or dodge. So unless you're getting an awful lot of inducements, 500k plus, I don't think he's particularly worth it, as you're not likely to be able to get many hits out of him. So I would consider this a no. Setek, this is a white with a strength increase, and he's also got break tackle, which you're not likely to use very often, as he's got loner. He's got strip ball, which is situational, and he's got juggernaut, which is situational. So you're playing around about 130k extra for a strength increase and 2 skills you don't tend to use very often. I would put that in the not really category. However, if you're down positionals, you might want to consider it. Next, we've got Wilhelm Chaney, arguably for his cost, one of the best star players, not only that Necromantic got access to, but that is in the game in general. So he is a strength 4 werewolf, and he's also got wrestle. So unless you're rolling both down, he's unlikely to turn himself over. He's still got claw like everyone else, and he's also got the catch skill, which is from previous editions of Blood Bowl where werewolves used to have the catch skill. At 240k team value, is incredibly well priced. So once you've got your initial bribes, you might want to consider getting Wilhelm Chaney onto your team sheet if you're playing uphill by about 500 TV. Earl Ice, simply put, is a ghoul which doesn't have any particularly great characteristics. So no, I get rid of him. He's also overpriced. And then we've got the final 2, which are Ramtut and Count Luther von Drachenberg, both of which for me are incredibly overpriced for what you get out of them, and I think you can better spend your money elsewhere. So no, I would pass on both of those. Last one we're going to talk about very quickly before the timer runs away is an Igor. and an Igor is effectively like an apothecary, which lets you roll a regen roll on a 4, 5 or a 6. So simply, it's not good enough. It's not what you would want to be taking, and a bribe is absolutely always worth more. Okay, so I'm going to quickly look now at an offensive setup that I would typically be using, and this is a regular shape that I use for Necromantic. Now, the idea here is, of course, you'd need to tailor it to the player and the team you're playing against, but the idea that you will be able to apply. So the ghoul is furthest back and is able to go and fetch anywhere the ball in the backfield or if it comes forwards. We've got 2 players on either flank to try and protect us a little bit against the blitz, where we won't get too overloaded, so we're nice and spread out. And then on the line of scrimmage, we want to have throwing blocks with block players. So presumably here, we've stacked enough guard to make sure we can get our 2 dice blocks off. And also notice that I've put a werewolf on the end. Now, what would be key in this situation, and I've turned the skills off deliberately, is so that we can then block on the diagonal on all occasions, and then we will guarantee we'd get a claw hit on one of the players. Now, if you're playing against Wood Elves or another Armour 17, claw is probably less important, but against anything with Armour 8 or Armour 9, trying to make sure we can get 1 or 2 claw hits off each time is a very good idea, as it maximises our opportunity to get rid of players from your opposition. I've kept one of the 2 werewolves further back, which is gives us the ability to respond if there is a blitz, and generally speaking, that's probably quite a good idea in the first turn. So keep one of your werewolves back, keep one on the line of scrimmage, and then the 2 whites, one will want to hit on the line of scrimmage, and then you're probably least killy of the 2 unless it goes and does a blitz, unless of course your opponent has given you something very juicy to go and hit. Turn 1 should always be all about ball consolidation, so you can take the ghoul and as many of the zombies over to go and screen off the ball and collect it and make it safe as possible. Do not try and do 2-turn scores with Necro straight off the bat. You're looking at an 8-turn drive, which is why this this offensive setup is so flat and so unoffensive, really. The only time that would change is if you've only been given 2 or 3 turns to score. Alright, right, this is going to be for defensive setups. In this section we've got 2 different defensive setups that you will see me regularly use when I'm playing. In this particular setup we are presenting to the opponent our least valuable players, which are the 4 zombies, and we are also presenting our 2 highest armour players, the flesh golems, for hitting initially, while we're also then protecting our 5 probably the most valuable players, which are the whites, the werewolves, and the ghoul. Typically here, if you've got a dirty player, this player would dirty player would sit here, and these guys would be the lowest skilled zombies you've got. If you have got a bench, then you would also just consider swapping out the zombies as appropriate, depending on what type of team you're playing against. If this is the start of a half, this is pretty good because you don't mind conceding the sidelines. If, however, you're maybe halfway through a half and you need to try and shore things up a little bit, then consider this setup, where we move to trying to cover the whole pitch with the team, and we swap to defending, again, our most valuable or weakest players, while at the same time trying to compromise and cover the whole pitch. So here we move the flesh golems out to the flanks, and they, because they've got stand firm, need to be knocked over to unlock the flanks, and then we've double banked everything in the middle, so even if he knocks over one of the front 3 players, he can't easily run through and get into our backfield. Now, situationally, you do need to remember that if our opponent is running around with Claw Mighty Blow players or players with Juggernaut, you need to tweak this. This is considered a baseline to work from rather than a definitive absolute must go to. So please consider your opponent's team and what players they've got.